Hi there, and welcome to Amazing Greats. My name's Rick Hansen, and today we talk with Police Sergeant Mark Tappan and his canine partner Mattis, who have been featured on Good Morning America, Fox and Friends, Live PD on A&E, Entertainment Tonight, cameos on Disney's Just Beyond, HBO's The Watchmen, and winning America's Top Dog Episode 4 on A&E. Canine Mattis is one of the most decorated police dogs ever. He's had over 200 arrests and over $2 million in cash seized, and he's even got a Purple Heart. Sergeant Mark Tappan was a Marine, a youth pastor, and now a sergeant in the Alpharetta, Georgia Police Department. While Mark has trained many dogs in his tenure as officer, he is clear that this is the best partner he's ever had. Join us for this rendition, this episode of Amazing Greats. You know, here's a guy who is not only a dog lover, he's a Jesus lover. He's an ex-Marine. He's an ex-pastor. And now he heads up the canine unit at in the police department in Alpharetta, Georgia. So, Mark Tappan, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I do have to correct you. I'm no longer the head of the canine unit. So once my dog retired, they kicked me out. They said I was too old
really?
and broken. Yeah. So now I do hiring and recruiting.
Okay, so my research, my intel was incorrect, and
That's
not up
okay.
to date.
I wish I was still in the canine unit. Best job in the world.
But you still work full time at the police department?
That's correct.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
very cool. So, you know, whether it's a police dog or just a household pet, there's one thing that it seems like dogs teach us humans is this thing called unconditional love. I mean, a good day or a bad day, they just want to love you and make you happy. And you learned that as a youngster back in the day, right?
That's right. Yeah, I was always surrounded by incredibly intelligent dogs, and I had a couple that were just best friends in the world.
Yeah. And because your dad was a trainer, is that
Yep,
right?
that's correct. He field trained lambs growing up.
Yeah. So you were around them all the time. Now, in just to kind of to track your Christian story, were you
Sure.
a Christian young lad as well back in those days?
I would have told you that I was. I grew up in a home that we went to church every weekend, and I'd go to youth group occasionally. I got into the Marine Corps and saw a lot of hypocrisy in my life. And because of the love of my sister and her awesome relationship with Jesus, made me realize that I needed the real Jesus in my life. And so, yeah, there was a lot of conviction. Great story. But I would have said I was, but no, I was not until I got into the Marine Corps.
I got you. So that's where we're going to go first. First of all, you had at
Yeah.
one point thought as a kid. See, I'm digging up stuff that maybe you may have a vague memory of, but you had thought that you might be a game show host. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, that was, I've never been much of a planner for anything. It's just kind of let things happen as they do. But there was a show back in the day. You'll probably remember it. I'm not saying you're old, but I am. Double Dare, you remember that on Nickelodeon with Mark Summers? It looked like the coolest game show in the world. And I was going into college, and I was a telecommunications major, and that was my plan. Was I was like, okay, that's what's going to happen once I get finished with my telecommunications. Is I will be the new host of Double Dare, and that didn't work out. Oh, I was on academic probation after 2 semesters, so I was like, "Ooh, I better rethink this."
So and then there was a period of time that so you went from potentially a game show host to a hanger of Christmas tree lights, and
Well,
that was your
some
next
stuff in
quick
between.
career.
No, Marine Corps was right after that. So when I realized game show host was not going to work out, that's when it was all right. We're going full bore Marine Corps. I had an uncle who was amazing. He's a generous man, loves the Lord, man of character, successful with both his family and in business. And he attributed a lot of his success to the things that he learned in the Marine Corps. And I didn't have a lot of those things like the work ethic and self discipline, self responsibility, and so I joined the Marine Corps. Christmas Lights was kind of after that.
Oh, it was
Funny
okay.
story with that too. Yeah. That one. Do you want to hear that story?
I do. Yes.
Okay, so that was. I got, like I said, I alluded to earlier, I got saved when I was in the Marine Corps, and I started going to a church out in California, and I absolutely loved the church. I started volunteering in it, and I was helping out with the youth group. It was time for my commitment in the Marine Corps to come up, and I decided that I was going to go back to Louisiana and go to Bible college. That's where I'm from. And the kids in the youth group, they're like, "You're going to leave us?" And I'm like, "You know what? No, I'm not. I'm staying here." And I was living in Southern California in South Orange County. We've all seen the TV shows about how expensive it is there. And so my plan, once again, I'm not much of a planner. I was like, okay, well, my buddy, he has a Christmas tree light business, so I'll hang Christmas tree lights and I'll stay out here and be a volunteer with the church. So that was my plan coming out of the Marine Corps. Was I was to sustain my life was to hang Christmas lights.
Let's slip back into that Marine Corps experience. And just because I wanted to know,
Mm-hmm.
there was a specific moment, obviously, or a time, a moment or season where you really became aware of Jesus and a
Mm-hmm.
relationship with Jesus. And can you tell us specifically how that happened?
I was in boot camp. I was the lay leader of my platoon. So if guys have problems, they come to me and they want to pray and stuff. I never put two and two together that your life actually had to reflect what you said you believe. And when I was in the Marine Corps, I was stationed overseas on an island called Diego Garcia. It's in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and I drank a lot. And I had several girlfriends while I was there, and my sister who loved the Lord, and I'd seen her life growing up, and there was a change in her now. There was something different about her faith and what I said about my faith, in just the practicality, the joy in her life. And she never condemned me. All she did was love me. She was consistent in writing letters. This is way before, well, not way before emails. I remember sending my first email in the Marine Corps, but she was sending me hard copies of letters. She would send me Christian CDs, and then she would, like, I go and visit her and I would just see this unexplainable joy in her life. And I'm like, there is something different about her than me that I'm not getting. And so I just picked up scripture and I started to read it, and I got to 1 John 2:6, and it says, if anyone would come after him, Jesus, he must walk as Jesus did. And I was like, my walk looks nothing like Jesus. And so I had to decide. I was like, it was one of those things that I had to look at my life and say, okay, do I really believe this? Is this real? Or I need to change. And so I dove into it, realized, okay, this is absolutely 100% real. And I need to change. So it was, I bowed the knee. This is another kind of funny story. In my barracks, I had a roommate that was in there too. And I started to surrender my life to Jesus. And as I did that, I started to hear music. And I was like, is this angels singing? I'm getting chill bumps. My hands are raising up in the air. And I went to a very conservative Baptist church. So I'm having all these charismatic things going on in my life. I'm like, oh, I'm hearing the angels singing as I'm getting saved. This is amazing. But oddly, they started singing, "Coming to America." And I'm like, why are the angels singing Neil Diamond? My roommate's headphones had fallen off as he was going to sleep. They had fallen off as I was praying, and it was fantastic. I thought it was just incredible. But that's when the Holy Spirit entered my life, and I became a Christian seal for the rest of
That
my
is
life.
fantastic. I have never heard that story before. So this is very good. The Neil Diamond connection, if you will.
That's right. That's right.
So Marine Corps hanging Christmas lights, but you didn't want to give up your involvement with young people and the Lord. So that transitioned into full-blown pastorship, right? Somehow.
Yeah, well, see, there's wisdom in the church, and they actually saw that my plan was pretty poor. And so they hired me on as an intern, and the internship led to junior high pastor. The junior high pastor led to high school, and then I was over student ministry, and I did that for 10 years.
Wow, in
So,
10 years. So
yeah.
that's a good length of time. There must have been at least one story of a
Uh,
real God moment during that period of time that you really can flash back on and enjoy.
well, enjoy. Yeah. there was this boy. He came with a group of friends, and it was the first time we were on the beach. Um, I didn't know we were going to go here. I was so excited about this story. But we went to the beach, and he and some friends came, and he was 11, 12 years old, and they were just the coolest kids, right? They were kids and having fun. And I learned after the youth group because his parents came to pick him up, and I introduced myself. I'm like, "Hey, thanks for bringing Drew and his group of friends." And they're like, "Oh, absolutely." And they're like, "Hey, there's something we should probably tell you about Drew." And they told me he had a condition. He had a hole in his heart. And they told me this because they're like, just watch him at youth group because sometimes if he starts playing too hard, and he was an athletic kid, he was like one that loved to play sports. And so I saw this kid. He was just a spectacular kid. He just had great character, good parents. He was kind to his friends. He was different than all the other kids. And he had a heart transplant, and he actually recovered from the heart transplant. But then there's complications after, and he ended up passing away. And I was there with his family during the entire experience, and I just thought about the sanctification process. And I remember looking at Drew's life, and here he was, and he wrote this little paper on Ephesians about just struggles in God and his relationship with Jesus. And it was one of the most impactful things I've read to this day. And as I think about the sanctification, is God makes the promise that He's going to carry it out to the end, and that's what I saw in this 12-year-old boy's life. And if you know anything about junior high boys, there's no maturity. There's
Yeah.
nothing but immaturity. And so it was cool to see the obvious hand of God at work in this kid's life, and the impact that he had in his life and in his death, and the faith of his parents, the legacy that he left through that. It was one of the greatest things. And I'm tearing up a little bit thinking about just their family and the difference they made in my life. It was, I'm a better man for knowing them.
Have you had the opportunity to keep in touch with them over the years, or
Yeah,
not really?
yeah, oh, absolutely. At one point, his dad was going to teach me guitar, which is another funny story. But yeah, I stay up with him on Facebook, and they ended up adopting two other girls, and just incredible people.
Wow, wow, wow. I didn't expect that story, and I didn't dig that up anywhere else. So this is good. We got
No, you
fresh new
didn't.
material here.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that story. And so let's move, because we really want to get into this amazing canine story, because that's where I found you, and that's where 5 million other people on social media have found you. Uh,
Yes, sir.
so so how did that transition happen? You left the youth pastor role
Hmm.
and became a police officer first, right?
Correct.
So walk me through that process, and then maybe even how canine entered into the picture.
Well, it was one of those that when I went into the Marine Corps, my actual intention when I got out was to be a police officer when I got out. And the neat thing is, I would have stayed in ministry until probably this day. I went through a church split, and some other things happened, and so it put me back on the path of what I thought I was supposed to do and being a police officer. But the great part about being a pastor was coming out of the Marine Corps. I don't think I had the maturity to be an effective police officer. There's a lot of immaturity, probably arrogance, lack of compassion, things like that. And so I think a lot of people are like, how do you go from being a pastor to a police officer? And it's like, to me, with the Marine Corps, being a pastor and now police officer, it's the perfect combination. It's not what I planned. Once again, I'm a horrible planner, but God had that ordained, and I think it really prepared me to be a better police officer. But I got into law enforcement. I have a strong sense of justice. I don't like seeing people being mistreated. I like standing up for the little guy because I am a little guy. Um, and yeah, so I got into it. Absolutely love it, believe in what I do. I'm an altruist. I want to contribute however I can to make this world a better place, and I want to shine in the midst of doing that for Jesus. So started doing it. Got into SWAT early on. Absolutely love that. I would do
Wow.
public demonstration. Yeah, yeah. Uh, which I absolutely loved. I did that for 6 years of my career. I was on patrol and we had a part-time SWAT team. So I did extra time on the SWAT team. And I saw when we do public demonstrations, I love dogs. I've always had dogs, but I'd see these public demonstrations and I really saw um, a need in police work to connect with the community. And I would see as we're doing these SWAT demonstrations, and I would show all our cool gear and talk about the amazing things that we did on the SWAT team. I'd see a guy that he'd roll up in a dirty car, but he had a canine, and immediately crowds would flock to him. And I was fascinated by the work that the dogs did, and I loved the bridge that they created. And so it was like there was one specific moment at a demonstration, this whole touch a truck event that happened, and I was like, "That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be canine."
Hmm.
And so it turned out a dog became available, and I committed myself. There was no way I was not going to get that dog.
That first dog wasn't Mattis, who we
Correct.
know and love, but that was kind of a dog that introduced you to what canine was all about, right? Great. His name
Absolutely.
was it Nico?
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. So a little bit about Nico, but we want to jump into Mattis too because we got a whole book
Mm-hmm.
about Mattis that you just wrote. Um,
Yeah, there's a little bit about Nico in there too.
is
Nico
it? Yeah,
taught me how
yeah.
to be a handler. Yeah.
It's a dog
So,
named Mattis is the name of the book. My producer always tells me make sure you get the name of the book
oh,
in
thank
there
you.
when you're talking about it. But we're going to get to that in just a minute. So Nico was the first experience with a canine partner.
Yes, he was hard headed and he had some flaws, but what I learned was his flaws were because of me, right? And that's where you kind of start off in canine handling, is you're like, why won't this dog do what I want it to do? And the answer is because you're not telling him how to do it properly. Like that's the key to dog training is you're supposed to be the smart one, right? They're the experts in the field. They're the ones who have these amazing noses and these amazing abilities, but you're supposed to be the one who can interpret what they say or what they're trying to tell you. And so all of Nico's flaws I realized were because of me. And so Nico slowly improved. Nico actually ended up he was blind in one eye, and I was scared he was going to get hurt because we almost did get hurt on a track once because we missed a bad guy that was off to our left side. And so that's when I realized that I had to retire Nico. But he was a special dog that taught me how to be a canine handler.
And then the introduction to Mattis was kind of unusual too, because Mattis was not like the ideal choice right from the beginning, right?
For me, yeah, because I had this aesthetic in my mind of what I wanted. And it was because I went to this trainer school. And the trainer that I had, who was an incredible trainer, Jeff Franklin with Cobra Canine, he had this little bitty, probably 55, 60 pound Belgian Malinois. Her name was Abby. And she was the most obedient, fierce, intelligent dog that I had ever seen. And I was like, that's the kind of dog I want. And there's really been a big shift, like in the military and police work, going towards the Belgian Malinois. And so that's what I was like, that's what I'm getting. I'm getting Belgian Malinois, 100%. And Jeff was actually he helped develop the program for working dogs for SEAL Team Six. And so like I was like, all right, we're gonna be SEAL Team Six. I'm gonna have a Belgian Malinois. This is gonna be amazing. And I saw the first time I saw Mattis, he jumped out of the car. And here's the thing: he wasn't supposed to be a police dog. He is a personal protection dog. So it means he didn't have all the training that all the other dogs did. And so they're like, "Hey, we'll show you this dog, but it's really just because we want to get him out and get him some exercise because he hasn't done some of the stuff before." I'm like, "Okay, perfect." He got out of the car. He's humongous. He's not 60 pounds. He's about 100 pounds. Huge German Shepherd. And Nico was a German Shepherd. And so in my mind, there were still some hangups like, oh, but German Shepherds can be stubborn. And I don't know. It was all Belgian Malinois. And then I started doing my tests, which it's like, how hard do they chase a ball? If you hide the ball from them, how hard do they hunt from the ball for the ball? If you put the ball in a place where they can't get to it, how hard do they try to get to the ball? So I did all these tests, and Mattis was like hands down the most incredible dog. Like he was doing things that I had never seen a dog do in these tests before. And I'm like, man, maybe I could get him, but I'm like, he's too big and he's a German Shepherd. And then we do my final test that I did for all the dogs was you get in the bite suit. I don't know if you've seen those before, but it's protective gear. And now sometimes you'll see them in their big poofy suits. I don't like the big poofy suits because it's not good for the dogs, right? So you get the smaller suits. It's not as good for the person, but it's better for the dog. It's not as good for the person because you can feel when the dog bites, like it really hurts. But the suit keeps the teeth from going through. And so I ran through all these tests with like 10 other dogs where I stood still in the corner and they come in, they bite me. And then I'd try to scare them a little bit on the bite, right? So I'd back them into a plastic chair. And if they popped off, I was like, well, all right, you can teach that. It's not a big deal. And then the last dog to come in, and I'm sitting there, I'm exhausted. I've had 10 dogs fight me, and all the dogs did pretty good. There was one Belgian Malinois that I almost want. I was like, that's probably the dog that I'm going to pick. And then Mattis came in. His name was Kanan at the time. He came in and he had this, like all the other dogs, they go nuts when they see the bite suit, right? They're like, they start barking, pulling at the edge of the leash, just going bonkers. Mattis walks in with this calm, fierce look in his eye. And he does that. He looks from person to person in the room. He knows what's up. He knows that it's time to go bite someone, but he's just calculating, okay, who's it going to be? But he's not going nuts. He's just focused. I'm like, that's amazing. Right. And so I put my suit on. I put the jacket on, which was sitting by me, and I go and stand in the corner, and he's not yapping. He just comes in and he bites me harder than any dog that I've ever bitten before in my life. I couldn't open my hand for 3 days. And I was
Wow.
like, oh my goodness, this stuff. Like he showed this fierce intelligence in this moment that none of the other dogs, or very few that I've seen since, can replicate. And I was like, that's the dog. That's it. I don't care how big he is. That's the dog that I want. He had that intangible that was just incredible.
And his name was Cayman. So where did Mattis come
Yep.
from?
Well, my son's name, who's upstairs, his name is Caden, and that's really close to Cayman. And so I didn't want to be yelling at the dog and my son to get his feelings hurt. So I knew I needed to change his name, and I'm being former Marine. He's named after General James Mad Dog Mattis.
I love it.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, that's cool. So the book is kind of a what the cool thing about the book is it's 12 stories about things that really happened that were a
Hmm.
part of your and Mattis's life. But not only that, but that attached to each of those stories is a lesson.
Hmm.
What did you learn from this? Probably what did Mattis learn from this? And then a little bite of scripture with every chapter too, which I kind of love too.
Oh,
Each
thanks.
chapter starts with a verse from scripture. So that's the book. But let's talk about. There was one moment that you had talked about somewhere along the line, and I locked in on it. Was the fact that you at one point had to really trust your gut
Mm,
to stick with Mattis
yeah.
because there was a problem. So tell us that story.
Well, I'm not sure which one that you're talking about. If you're
Oh,
talking
was there
about
more than one? So I got
oh
halfway through the
yeah.
book, and there might be some stuff I'm not up to yet. So,
Well, there's the one in selection that he never should have been a police dog, and then there's another one during the track, which that I wanted to give up. I think that's the one that you're probably talking
well, he
about.
had a dental issue. Is the one I'm
Oh,
thinking.
so that's when I selected him. Yeah,
Okay.
um, yeah, that's one where like right after I picked him, we got into the training class, and the training class was an abbreviated one. I was already an experienced handler, and I was actually also a trainer. And so I had trained several dogs. I had experience. So it was a brief class of only 6 weeks. And so, but the problem was, like I said, Mattis didn't have any odor work that was imprinted on it. So I had to teach him all the odor stuff on the side. All the other dogs already knew that stuff. Now, the first week of training, he chipped a tooth. And so the course, they told me, okay, well, it's 6 weeks. If he has a chipped tooth, he's not going to be able to do any bite work. And the way that you reward these dogs for like doing what you're asking them to do, if they go and find an odor, you toss them a ball. And if I toss him a ball, he can break off the remainder of his tooth. And so they're like, you're not going to be able to train your dog. And I'm like, I don't care. That dog is special and I want that dog. Um, And so I'm like, I don't care what it takes. And it was risking my canine career because my department, when you go and train for canine, you're being sent away from the road and your responsibilities for that time frame to train the dog, and you come back so that you can be used. Now, if I had to start or if this didn't work out, that 6 week process, it's very likely that they say, okay, we don't need the dog, and you just go back to patrol. And
Uh,
so I was taking a huge risk, but I just knew that this dog was special. And so I said, no, I still want that dog. I'll train him. I promise he's going to be okay. One thing you can't test in dogs is their learning curve. And I just was taking a huge risk too that he could pick things up really fast because I thought I saw that in him. So during the course, I was not allowed to do anything with him regarded to odor. So what I would do is I found a way because he couldn't bite down on a ball that he liked to play with or a tug toy because that could rip out his tooth. And so I went to my hotel room and I just took a face towel and I wrapped it up. Um, and that's what I would use. And I would get it past his front canines and I'd reward him with that. So if he did something I wanted to, I'd go in early in the morning to train him. I'd stay late in the afternoon to train him at the school, which was in Alabama and we're in Georgia. So I'm staying in a hotel. So I would spend all this extra time to train him so that he could be ready for the job. But this little face towel, which they had never used before, I just put some duct tape on it, shoved it into his mouth as deep as I could, and would play with him. And it turned out at the end of the course, he was actually the only dog who passed certification, which I thought was really cool.
really? Wow.
On the first try, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They ended up in about the I think it was the fourth or the end of the fourth week. They capped his tooth with a titanium overlay, which had to set for a week, which put us right like the day of certification is when he was finally cleared that he could bite something. And that was important because that was the day that he was going to have to bite something. And he just nailed everything. He was such an incredible dog.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So you and he are partners for a while, for what, 6 years, something like that?
6.5. Yep.
Yeah. And is Madison still alive and well?
He's sitting right here by my side. Here, let me give you a
Is
little.
he?
Yeah, he's always by
Oh
my
my
side.
gosh,
There he
look at
is.
that. I
Yeah.
was hoping we'd have an opportunity to put him on the camera. For those of you who are listening on the audio version, you just missed out on a great shot of Matt's on the floor. So, and he's looks like he's just relaxing and enjoying retirement. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yes, but at the same time, he would much rather go to work. Like yesterday, we got the chance to go read. We have a kids book too, and I got to go to my daughter's school and read the book. And so I came home and I got his harness out, and that was his clue that we were going to work when he was actually working with me. And he got so excited. He started running in circles. He comes to the harness. He pops his head through. I get him ready, and he darts out straight to my car. It was like he was like, "Can we do this every day?" And he had to retire because of a medical issue, so it's really not safe for him.
Yeah.
But it was, yeah, he loves to work and he loves being with me, and I love being with him. So anyway,
Let's
yes, he likes retirement, but he'd rather be working.
Yeah, I got you. So, and that really is like, I think people who are energetic and love what they do would rather be doing that, even us humans, right? So, um, so let's pluck something out of the book that maybe your favorite story or your favorite chapter that you can share with us. What would that be? I know, like there was a I was going to run through a few of these chapter titles just because they're so
Okay.
cool. One is Go All In, Build
Yeah.
Bridges, Not Walls, Persistence Pays, God Works for the Good, Keep Your Eyes on What's Important, Let Your Light Shine. And there were several others too, but I just
Mhm.
plucked those out. So, but tell us what chapter might be your favorite.
Well, I think it's the one that I alluded to earlier was where I had to trust him. It was we were on this track, and it was his first track. Right when we got back from school, from canine school, he had just passed certification, and I was so excited about this dog. And there was someone who stole something from them all, and it was not a big deal. It was like one of those things that most of the time you're like, okay, you go take the report. But I really wanted to use my dog, and so he one of his capabilities is tracking good guys or bad guys. So it doesn't mean that just because I'm using him that he's going to bite someone at the end, right? He can find a lost kid. He's like super stable dog. So anyway, in the circumstances, they had run off, and then they started going. on the interstate. And so we kind of canceled it, but they ended up wrecking out on the side of the road. So I came up, it was raining, which is not the best conditions to track in. It was a little cold. And the supervisor is like, it's not that big of a deal. But I'm like, it's a slow day. I'd like to use my dog. So can I just give it a shot? And he's like, sure, go ahead. And so I got another officer with me and we start tracking. So he goes up to the car, he gets the odors, which I think is just absolutely incredible that dogs can see this, is they see the world through their nose. And so what he did in that moment is he goes and sticks his head in that car and he gathers the information in his brain that, okay, it's these two people that were in here that are no longer here that I'm looking for. I mean, you got to think there's dozens of officers that are surrounding us. So all this human odor, but he knows it's not any of these people. It's the two that ran away. And so he starts on this track and we start going down along the freeway, which is also hard because you got to think how odor works. You have all these cars, it's blowing odor everywhere, but he's killing it. He's going. And he gets to this ditch that cuts back up underneath this, I think it's a 8 lane freeway, right? So this ditch goes underneath. Like I said, it's raining, it's dark, it's about a 3.5 foot tunnel. And I'm not tall, but it's one of those that I couldn't crawl and I couldn't stand all the way up. So I'm like hunched over the entire way. Mattis is pulling full force through this tunnel and it's concrete and rough concrete. So as you can see, I am follically challenged, which means my head was dragging on top of the concrete half the way through. My back's hurting. I got blood running down my face. There's rats at our feet. My dog is just plowing through, but I'm getting exhausted. It's probably 100 yards from one side of the tunnel to the other. And we get to the other side and there's a waterfall. Like it drops off about probably about 25, 30 feet. And I'm like, there's no way they came this way. And so I'm exhausted, blood running down my face, skin hanging off my head, my back hurts. And I'm trying to decide if I want to continue on. And I look over to the side and there's a shoe right in the mud to the side of the entrance of the tunnel or the exit of the tunnel. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this dog is nailing it. And these are all like it's through water, which this is an advanced technique that I haven't even taught him yet, right? We've only done very basic training on tracking. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's keep going. He's nailing it. And so I carefully pull myself up through the mud. So now I'm bloodied, tired, backaches,
Man.
covered and caked in mud. And the dog starts pulling like straight down this hill. And like I said, he tracks fast. And so I'm like falling, hitting trees on the way down as he's dragging me through the woods. My backup's probably laughing at me as all of this is happening. He was doing a great job keeping up with me. We go through a stream, out the other side of the stream, then back up the mountain, and then back down again. And I'm like, this dog has no clue what he's doing. We've been tracking for like over a mile now. And I was exhausted when I came out of the tunnel. Now I'm really exhausted and I'm ready to give up again. And so I tell Mattis to lay down. And I asked my backup officer, I'm like, hey, there's a street up that way. Can you go and check what that is? Because we got the Chattahoochee River over to our right. I'm like, there's a street right there. Can you see what that is so that I can tell someone to come pick us up? And he starts going and Mattis starts pulling. And I'm like, why are you pulling? I told you to lay down. Right. And so I'm getting frustrated with him. And he's pulling and he's pulling towards this one area. And I look where the area is, there's another shoe. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this dog is killing it. And so I'm like, okay, I got to trust him. And so he starts tracking again. I call my backup back and we start running. And I see about 200 yards off in the distance, two people that have been running from us the entire time in the woods. And we're catching up to them now. I'm at a full sprint. Mattis is at a full sprint. I tell them to give up. They do. They were exhausted. I was exhausted. Mattis's tail is just wagging. But it was one of those that through this story, it was like so much that I was beat down. I was hurt. I had doubts in my dog. And I wanted to give up. And that's kind of where, the lens comes in, the lesson that I learned is that you don't give up. You trust your dog. There's a reason that we have these dogs. Their noses are incredible. And if they mess up, most of the time it's on us. And it would have been on me. If we hadn't found those guys at the end, it was because I wanted to quit. And he was right the entire time. So
Wow.
it's lessons like that. It's like, don't give up. If God's got a plan, he'll bring you through it. Even if it's hard going through it, keep persevering.
And all to get a mall theft, right? So that's,
Yeah.
but that's kind of
Yeah.
beside the point, really.
Right.
It's the whole concept is just fantastic. So, so tell me some other, God tidbits with you and Mattis through your experiences together. Maybe just one other incident where God was, I can trace as you're talking today, and as I've
Hmm.
researched your background, I can trace the spots where it was very clearly likely a God thing. And like you said,
Yeah.
you're not a planner, so you depended on God to do the planning. Yeah, and you
Yeah.
trusted that, so that's good.
Yeah, I think what you alluded to very early on in the interview, like one of the biggest impacts that dogs have had on my life is the unconditional love that they have. And I think that's one of the things that convicts me most. And all this book it's a collection with my worldview lens of seeing God work all around us in everything. And that's kind of what I hope readers take away is that, yeah, my circumstances are with a dog, and hopefully it's some cool cop stories that you get. But I learned so much because of the way that he attacks life, the way that he loves to go to work, right? And that's one of the common themes that I keep going back to, and it's something my mom really instilled in me too. Is Colossians 3:23, and it says, "Everything you do, work at it with all your heart, as if you're working for the Lord, not for men." And that's what I saw in Mattis every day that he went to work was this incredible work ethic, this joy that he had to run to the car, to jump in, to put his harness on, right, to do any job that I asked him to. And it was because of this bond that we had built. Um, I mean, there's so many stories, but that was the most convicting is just the way that when you come through the door after being gone for 20 minutes, how they love you like they haven't seen you in a week. It's
Yeah,
amazing,
yeah.
and those are the things that it makes me want to be a better employee, a better dad, a better husband, a better Christian. Just in this life is because of creation, which is what Romans 13 tells us, right? Is creation will leave you without an excuse. That you have to say there is a God, and that's what dogs have done. That's what everything should do for everyone.
I'm a dog lover too, and so, but never to the. I mean, I've never had that kind of special relationship, nor have I been a very good trainer, to be honest with you. It's
That's
whatever
usually what
they
it is.
when they're undisciplined. It's not because they don't want to be. It's because I've
Correct.
never taught them how to be. But one of my last dog passed away at 17, but we had to put him down. So the three
Oh,
things. So as I'm going through these weeks of him being unhealthy, I'm thinking to myself, what am I learning from this in my life? And one of the things, and the first thing that came to my mind was unconditional love, but
mm,
then it was patience, because here I was having to kind of force feed him. I was having to give him arthritis medicine. I was having to
mm,
all of this stuff, and it was caretaking 24/7, really. So patience was another thing. And then the third thing was courage,
mm.
because courage, it took me a lot of courage to come to the point where I had to decide it's time for him to go. And I was always praying,
Ah,
God, please take him in the night, that I don't have to make
yeah,
a decision. But God didn't give me that. He gave me the gift of courage by making that decision. So, and
yeah.
now I'm tearing up.
I tell people all the time is there's animals with better olfactory senses than dogs. But the thing that sets dogs apart is the bond that they have with people, right? And one of the other emphases on my book too is that it creates this amazing bridge with people. And it's one of the things I think being a police officer, one of the great things I get to do is I get to speak to people in their darkest times and hopefully be a light. And with a dog, it intensifies that because where people usually don't want to talk to a police officer, if it's a canine, all of a sudden they do. They're interested. They're fascinated, and it
Isn't that so?
creates this avenue. Yeah, and I love it. So
Yeah.
but it's to your story. It's exactly that. Is there's a special bond between people and dogs
Yeah.
that makes them perfect for this kind of work or just as a companion.
Yeah. And now you've inspired me. We now have a new dog after a year and a half of not having a dog. We have a new dog, and he is a puppy and a rascal. So,
I
so, so I'm taking some tidbits from your story to
like it.
try to get a little better control over his behavior. So anyway, so if there's one thing we've already kind of said this, but if there was something that you would love your readers to take away as a takeaway from the book, what would that be?
Well, you get two. One is what we've already talked about is just that you'd be able to like enjoy the circumstances that I give to you, but be able to apply those to your own life and see how God's working in these circumstances through yours. And then if you could fall in love with these dogs and the work that they do, I'm fascinated by it. I think what they do is incredible, and there's some amazing stories that are out there.
So you're now doing, tell me specifically what you're doing. You're still with the police department and you do recruitment of dogs or of
No,
people.
I wish. Dogs, I think, are easier to find than people are sometimes. Yeah, I do hiring and recruiting for my department. So, Alpharetta PD, if you're looking for a job, come on out. There you go.
All right. And what's next for you? Are you going to, is there more books in you to along the line?
I never. First of all, if not for the belief of some people in my life, I mean, you hear my background, right? A college dropout, Marine, crayon eater here, um, and not much of a planner. There were some people that believed in me, and that's why this book came out. But as I sat and I started thinking about the stories that I'm telling, there's so many other handlers with great stories and great lessons to be learned. And so I think, like, as I thought about it, I'd really like to talk to other handlers and get their stories and then introduce people to the lessons and the heroes that are out there.
In the form
So
of
hopefully,
in the
and
form of
book
a
in a
book.
book form, yeah. Oh
Okay.
yeah, that would be fun.
And now the book that you just wrote is there's an audio version of it as well.
Correct. Yep. Anywhere you get your books, audio versions, whatever, it should be out there.
Did you do the narration?
I did. I
Okay.
did. And, there's a couple very emotional moments in the book, and it was hard to get through those. I'm an emotional guy, so it
Yeah.
kind of comes through.
Yeah, well, that is, I love when the author actually is the narrator too, because you get a sense of emotion beyond just the reading of the words. I guess the last question is the game show host thing out of the picture now?
I think it's more likely now is, I might have avenues to actually do this. And ironically, because of Mattis and all that he accomplished, we got to go on a game show, which I thought was pretty cool.
Really? What was the
Yeah,
game show?
America's Top Dog. We won our episode, came in second in the champions, so that's part of our lore, and that's a chapter in the book as well.
I really love your story. Love you. I mean, this has been a
Thanks for
pleasure to check in and find out about the story. I will be following you. Thank you so much for your time. God
Thank
bless
you,
you for
sir.
all that you've done and are about to do.
Thank you, Rick. It was a pleasure.
Wow, what a great story and a great storyteller. Mark Tappan and his book, A Dog Named Mattis, is available now on Amazon. Links to all of his social media opportunities are listed in the show notes here. Thanks for listening or watching to this very special episode of Amazing Greats. Please take a moment to share, subscribe, and like the podcast to help share these many fingerprints of God with others. And check them out on our website at www.amazinggreats.net. The whole library of Amazing Greats episodes is right there. Thank you, and God bless.